Howdy, folks. Welcome to another weekly roundup with the gang here at Socialist Telly. Myself, Cornish Damo, obviously, with Mr. Steve Walker, with Nico, Alice, and Bonnie this week. Fantastic. How are you, folks?
Hi, everybody.
Another week done.
Another week done. What a week, though. What a week, my goodness me. So we had a little speech yesterday. Did anybody watch it?
Has the paint dried yet?
Has the paint dried yet? Oh,
you know, watching paint dry.
Oh, so
you know, I first compared watching that speech to watching paint dry, and then I realised that actually watching paint dry doesn't make your eyeballs hurt.
Yeah.
And you know, that was the it was actually difficult to work through. It wasn't just passively sitting there and listening to it. You had to kind of steel yourself to keep going, because it was almost worse with the bits when he tried to do emotion.
Yeah, well, it doesn't seem to come naturally to him.
Yes. No, not at all.
So the Brill Creamed Keith did a keynote speech yesterday. Did anyone catch it? Did you make it through to the end? You deserve a medal, frankly, if you did. He made Droopy the dog look positively Tiggerish by comparison. Blue kit background, the favourite colour of the Prince of Darkness, Peter Mandelson, as we all know, is anything but red, and there it was for all to see. There was absolutely no passion there, no emphasis on anything. What almost passed for actual policy positions went by with it being fleshed out once more. He told us that COVID had shown the best of Britain, and insofar as the majority of us have obeyed the rules of each lockdown and tier, I'd somewhat agree, but only on that point, because the actions of the government, the incompetence, the corner cutting, which he had supported, do not show this country in anything close to a positive light. But this was only one example of shoehorning patriotism into his speech. He brought up the post-war government of Attlee 3 times to invoke some sort of fighting spirit. You haven't fought Keith. You've acquiesced. You've bowed to Boris every time in the name of wanting them to get it right, or in the name of constructive opposition. Constructive opposition is putting an alternative on the table, a distinctly different course of action. And when every other country on earth has dealt with it better, basically, you've only had to pinch one of their ideas, and then you champion it. You present it to the public. You show how Labour would do it differently. You've come across as a man bereft of ideas. And indeed, it's been said by former allies this week that every time you say you agree with the government, it's because you've nothing different to offer yourself. Nothing better to say. You compare yourself to Attlee and what his government achieved, you aren't fit to shine his shoes. Recovery bonds. Why not a wealth tax? Much easier. People smiling as they left vaccination centres. Were they not wearing masks? But the biggest farce of this, in my opinion, you even laughed as you said it, Keith. You didn't believe it yourself as you said it, but you portrayed yourself as someone who could work with the trade unions. Every union president or general secretary must have choked on their cornflakes when they heard that, and I bet we'll cover some of that in more detail today, but this came across with less substance than the baby's proverbial bathwater. A business-minded establishment stooge in a position of leadership he wanted, but no idea what to do since he got there. How did you guys find that speech? Did you survive it? Did you make it through to the end?
The only thing that kept me watching was the anticipatory lean forward, look sincere before he uttered any comment. Could almost imagine a little person in his ear saying, "Now, this is a sincere bit, lean forward, look intense, it's important." You know.
Yeah, I think it was kind of said the right things, as in, you know, what is needed is what was needed after the war, you know, and then he's kind of built that up, and then it was like, so where is it? You know, where's that policy? Where's the, you know, mass building of council houses? Where's the investment in public services? Where is the ambition and the, you know, the substance to it? I think it was kind of like, we're going to use that because we know it's a popular thing, we know it's a rousing call kind of thing, but then it just wasn't backed up with anything, you know, of substance, any policies, anything that would say, you know, how we capture that spirit, how we, you know, start to rebuild. It just fell flat for me.
Wow.
I had oops.
I heard somebody in the background.
It's me in the foreground. The bit about the post-war reconstruction of the country, it was a vast program of nationalization. It wasn't insourcing within a contract system, you know, designed for business. To you know, that's what Labour's talked about recently. And the other thing about that is that all that we had after the war is being taken away. That's the big drama at the moment. It's going. NHS, all the other things over the last few decades. That's the project has been to take that away. So if you're really going to commit to that, as actually that was what the Corbyn project was basically about. I mean, it was about bringing back the idea that governments work for people, not not abandon them. That's a serious position to take, but it wasn't made explicit at all. And we have to bear in mind, even Boris Johnson a few months ago made reference to the Attlee government and said that they are going to undergo a huge program that he was comparing to that, but that it's about the private sector first. So it's a reverse project that Boris Johnson is talking about. So in that context, if you're not actually committing to renationalisation, you're basically going along with Boris Attlee's vision. And that's what I'm saying.
I think, yeah, I mean, that the main thing for me is it's not like there's any shortage of things to actually oppose at the minute. So that, there's everything that's going on with the NHS, there's Boris Johnson's cronyism, there's the fact that people are still only getting one, set of vaccines, there's the fact that, basically everything, that could be done wrong in the pandemic is being done wrong. And we're up to nearly 130,000 people now that have died. And Keir Starmer, his big moment in his speech yesterday was recovery bonds. And it was like, well, the Labour leader's going absent without leave, essentially. He's just, he's put some kind of wooden cutout up with a bit of a recording on backwards, kind of, do it. We agree with the government, but do it faster. And recovery bonds is it's not exactly something that your man in the street or woman in the street is going to be able to invest in and benefit from. It's going to be yet another excuse for huge corporations and investment companies to hoover up and enrich themselves even further. So if it wasn't enough that they've gained however many trillions of pounds during this pandemic at the expense of working people, suddenly we've got the Labour leader up there offering them another handout.
I think personally that part in the speech about the bonds shows him as possibly the most out of touch Labour leader we've had since Tony Blair. But, given who his new advisor is, that's perhaps not surprising. He actually spoke about people managing to have saved some money during this pandemic. Well, the real lived experience of the majority of people in this country is furlough on 80% or less of their regular pay. It's job insecurity, it's redundancy, it's mass unemployment. These are the real problems that actual people in the streets are facing, and everything that we need to buy has become more expensive for most people. So there is no, I don't know anyone who's increased their savings. I know a lot of people who are now in food poverty, as we've seen from Ian Byrne's Right to Food campaign. And I've seen lots of pleas that evictions from housing are on pause during the pandemic. So these people, we're talking about a lot of people in real financial difficulty. And we've got the leader of a Labour Party standing up offering us bonds.
Yeah.
The money can't come from the general population. It has to come from all of those new billionaires that have been created during this pandemic.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you've been saying there, actually, Bonnie. When you come, you brought up savers on a couple of occasions. It's that far too many people literally empty their bank accounts week on week. They operate hand to mouth, where it comes, when their money comes in, it goes straight out again. And, people have, emptying their bank accounts, they still can't afford the basics. I mean, I've got no idea who Keir Starmer was actually aiming this at, because I don't know anybody who's been making savings either. And the recovery bond, it sounds all very nice and economic and sound and professional and all the rest of it, but why not just levy a tax on those who've made a killing during the pandemic? John Trickett pointed this out after the speech went out. It's flaming obvious. But, the billionaire class have made £46 billion over the last year. If Starmer is so concerned about inequality, then that's who he should be aiming this for. That's who he should be advocating. This is the action he should be advocating, for heaven's sake. Recovery bonds, it's just such a vague term. It could mean so much. And even when he was pressed on it by one of the journalists, what would you use that money raised from those bonds to spend on? He couldn't put it down to any one thing. He said, they could be used for anything. Well, what, man? Come on, tell us what you actually stand for.
It's
Yeah.
not
there weren't
exactly
many
rocket
answers, were
science
there?
to come up with a bunch of policies either. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, Trickett came out with a list of 10 within about 10 minutes of the end of the speech of things that would actually make a difference in people's lives. You know, simple stuff like let's ban fire and rehire, which has become the go-to tactic for companies trying to increase their profits even further. You know, and I think it was fairly obvious who he's pitching at the the upper echelon. Kind of, the people that would have paid more tax under Jeremy Corbyn, he's pitching at them and saying, don't worry, we're not going to, we'll give you a chance to make more money. We're not going to take any off you. Your ordinary working person or not working person who is, has lost the job in the pandemic and is struggling, the money in the economy that's distributed in the wrong places to help the economy is not in their bank accounts. Because what goes into an ordinary person's bank account usually goes out pretty quick and back into the economy. It's in the hordes of people who are essentially going off and burying the wealth somewhere where it can't be taxed.
Yeah, I think it was a bit crass, wasn't it?
Sorry, say that again.
It was a bit crass, really. I think it didn't acknowledge the reality for a lot of people. I mean, if you're in a minimum wage job and you're on furlough, so you're only getting 80% of that, you're not making savings. If you're in a minimum wage job and you're getting 100% of your wage, you're not making savings. There are people on what would be seen as a reasonable wage that can't even make savings. The cost of living is high. And I just think this concept that people are somehow getting richer through the pandemic is completely out of touch. That's just not the reality for many families. At least if you've got a 2-income household, at least one income will have been impacted. If you're a lone parent, you're going to have been restricted in how you can work because of kids being at home, that kind of thing. It's very it's a very small subset of people that's aimed at, and considering it was the only sort of solid policy that came out of the speech, I think it was really wide of the mark.
I think, we can see the impacts of some of that, and we'll move on slightly, but, it links in with the speech in the fact that, the Bakers Union we saw this week are having a consultation on whether their members want to stay affiliated to the Labour Party, because, there's serious question marks over whether the party's actually doing them any good and whether it's worth them paying, some of their subs to go towards the maintaining that affiliation. And we saw Ian Hodgson, the president of the Bakers Union. They're called the Bakers, but they're anybody in the food industry essentially. So that might be somebody on a low wage working in food production, in a crisp factory, whatever. But 9% of their members so far, and I mean the consultation has been going on for about well over a month already, and the results so far suggest that less than 1/10 of people in the union consider that it's worth staying affiliated to Labour because Labour's doing them any good. And, that should be a massive warning sign. So my question really on that is, as Starmer, if he ever seriously intended trying to win back working class seats and working class voters, has he given up on it now? And he's just going through the motions, is his flag shagging, is the term that we coined the other week, just to cover for the fact that really he doesn't give a toss whether he wins back northern working class seats and the other ones in the Midlands, etc., that turned against Labour.
I think fundamentally he kind of exposed his way of thinking. You would think, given the financial threat to the Labour Party from unions withdrawing funding or threatening disaffiliation, which is looking very, very likely when it comes to the Bakers Union at this point in time, that 9% should scare any Labour leader right now. I mean, it's just one union, yes, but others tend, they can and will follow if you don't change tack. Why are they leaving to start with? What are you doing to put them off? And in that speech, when he decided to say we would work with the unions, he couldn't suppress a giggle. He laughed as he said it, essentially. It was the only bit of excitement I actually saw out of him, was when he decided to stand up and say, we need a leader that can work with the unions. I said, you've been working against them the whole time and you know it. That's why you couldn't even keep a straight face when you said it. I mean, I thought lawyers were supposed to have proper gambling faces as well, but he couldn't let that one slide through. Unite has already withdrawn some of its contributions. The Bakers are on the verge of disaffiliation. I know Steve Rack of the Fire Brigade Union was also on your show on Monday, Steve, and he also
Matt, yeah,
he put a shot across the bows as well. these should be wake-up calls to a Labour leader, and he just doesn't seem to care. And from what we've heard, the donors are not coming back to the party. So what's his end game here?
We're also seeing, obviously, in the last week, we've seen many constituency Labour parties passing a motion to recall conference because of the concern over the removal of democracy in our party, and that conference or recall conference motion was largely drafted by the FBU. I know the Bakers had input as well. My own CLP passed it with only one vote against in this week, and I've seen many others in the last week also doing the same thing. So there's a genuine sweep of disaffection amongst the membership and the trade unions right across the party. You know, is he on a mission to annihilate everything that we stand for and remove all chance of achieving any kind of fair society, which is, after all, why we're all involved as we are in party politics?
No, it's not fair to be entirely negative about the speech, so I will say one positive thing: we didn't see the thumb of power.
There is that.
We saw the new one that his coaches have obviously been telling him, which is doing this, and it's almost like the Italian kind of chef going,
kiss.
"Oh, that's great." but this and the lead into the camera that Damo, but he looked like he needed the loo. Frankly,
isn't that claw thing that Skeletor used to do to He-Man back in the day? Right, wasn't it?
Yes. Go, we're showing our age.
You're at my age away now.
We'll hop around a little bit then and switch between different topics, but the media and vaccinations, what's going on in terms of how that's being presented to the great British public?
Yeah, I think it's every sort of headline I've seen from any major newspaper is saying 15 million people vaccinated, and like they're completely done, like they're safe against the coronavirus. I've not seen a single newspaper that's led with the headline of how many people have actually had 2 doses. I think it's been very distorted, and I understand that maybe we want some good news at this time because it's been a pretty grueling year for everybody. But that kind of misrepresentation just shows the sort of the bias that the media have, that they will willfully mislead people into supporting a government that, quite frankly, have done an appalling job of looking after its citizens. And the fact that we've got 15 million people halfway to being vaccinated is fantastic news. But just be more realistic about it. Don't act like that's a done deal, like everybody in that grouping is now safe. It's very, very strange reporting, really, to report that is what has happened when we're nowhere near that stage yet. There's a lot of people still waiting a second dose, and until that's done, I don't think we can really say that people are vaccinated.
Yeah,
Bonnie, you've been waiting for a vaccination and still haven't got one, haven't you? So
no. I think it's also worrying that I'm beginning to hear mumblings that some employers might start insisting that all their staff have both vaccines before they can come to work. So I'm really worried, actually, that people, through no fault of their own, or because for whatever reason they've got an issue being vaccinated, could be put out of a job. This is not how you build trust in a society. We want people to want these vaccines. They're there to help us. But the minute you start throwing around threats to the security of your job going forward, or your employability if you're out of a job at the moment, you're going to breed an enormous amount of distrust in the medical profession and what the government need us to do in order to get everything moving again.
I don't know if anybody else spotted what the TV news channels have started doing in the last couple of days as well. Because I think somebody from the government must have had a little word with them that it didn't look good, because they've been putting this, on the odd occasion when they haven't called everybody just vaccinated, they've been putting up, first doses, 15 million or whatever we're up to now. And they used to put second doses, 570,000 or whatever the latest figure. And now suddenly they've stopped showing you that it's only 570,000 and started putting it as a percentage. And it still looks appalling because it's 1% that they're putting up, but they're obviously trying to draw people's eye away from the fact that the number of people who have actually been vaccinated with both doses for the proper effect of the thing is pitifully low.
I think as well that I speak for a lot of parents out there who are concerned that this high number of first vaccinations are going to drive a premature return to school for all children as well, because we saw last September, as was entirely predictable, the infection rate go up, because obviously children don't just exist in school, they go home to families, they go to shops with their parents and so on. And if children are going back to school, even if every single teacher has been vaccinated, until every single parent, grandparent, relative, shop worker has been vaccinated, it isn't safe for those kids to go back for the rest of the community. Even if the kids don't catch it or aren't seriously ill with it, it's a risk to the whole of the community for them to go back prematurely. We saw that in September, and I'm really concerned. Every media outlet is pushing this, kids need to get back to school, and kids are going to have to study and be at school all through the summer holidays, and let's extend the year till Christmas and so on. All of these things are misplaced. These should not be the priority. The priority should be keeping the population safe from what is a killer virus.
Yeah, the news needs to stop it being so misleading. It needs to remember that it is supposed to be there to factually inform people. And when it misleads to the point that it gives the government a boost, a vaccine boost, as they've been calling it, when actually it's the NHS that's been delivering this. And actually it's nothing to do with the government acting at all. It's for a change. It's the right people doing the job that they should be there for. The NHS has had 70 odd years of experience of dealing with these sort of things before the whole outsourcing and privatization of various parts of the NHS, where we've now seen those sections of the NHS start to fail. But these vaccinations absolutely do need to be done. People do need to go and make sure they're having their vaccines. My wife's getting her first one tomorrow. Thankfully, she's now been flagged up with this new round of people are now eligible for it as priority. So we're delighted that she's finally getting that first jab. But it is a first jab. It is not fully vaccinated, and people are not fully covered until they've had both vaccines, because that is how this vaccine has been designed to work. And it is misleading of the media to keep spinning this line that, oh, you've had a jab, oh, so many million have had this first jab now, let's start reopening stuff up again. No, this is the mistake that was made first time, second time, and now they're determined to do it for a third time. If you want this to be the last lockdown, get real, report things properly. Let's get those daily cases down from the tens of thousands to below 1,000, as an example. I'm not a sage scientist. I'm not trying to profess a particular figure, but get it down to a point where they have confidence that this is not going to lead to a fourth lockdown. Because I think a great many people would much rather this lockdown go on a little bit longer to make sure it's the last one, rather than have to do this all over again for a fourth time in the summer.
And it's not just the media as well, because as you mentioned at the top of the show, Damo, Keir Starmer was talking about people coming out with beaming smiles. Well, I might have a beaming smile when I come out from my second vaccination, but I'm unlikely to be beaming just from the first one. Yeah, but the way that the media's presented this, and Keir Starmer hasn't just given the government a free pass; it's demonised teachers. No. And I'm hearing from more and more teachers about the fact that they're getting hate mail, they're getting, not physically attacked, thank God yet, but verbally attacked in the street for supposedly being the obstacle and the ones that are mourning. And we saw this week, I don't know if anybody else saw it, but a shadow schools minister, one of Keir Starmer's front bench, putting out a mock front page of a newspaper as part of his newsletter that had a cartoon on it with a teacher kind of screaming at the kids to get out because he hadn't been vaccinated yet, with the Bash Street kids, I think it was, from the Beano running into his classroom, making out as though it's the teachers that are the obstacle on this. And you could vaccinate every single teacher, it still wouldn't be safe to put kids back in school, because the problem isn't just teachers catching it, it's the kids giving it to each other and bringing it on to vulnerable relatives. So the whole political and media estate virtually at the moment seems to be ranged against ordinary people trying to do their job, and the unions trying to keep them safe. And the Labour leader, to his absolute shame and discredit, is one of the bricks in that wall, really.
Another major piece of news about the virus came out this week as well, the day after Boris Johnson's speech about the roadmap out of this pandemic, that actually admitted to there being almost double the number of clinically extremely vulnerable people that they'd estimated in the first round. I heard it come out on the radio. I haven't seen it on the television news or in the printed press. But what we're seeing now is, well, what we ought to be seeing now from Keir are questions about how many people were exposed that should have been included on the clinically extremely vulnerable list the first time round. And they've kept that news quiet until February, when, as I understand it, that research was available from October. So we've seen lots of people knowingly been put at risk of death by the ineptitude and incompetence of this government. And for whatever reason, the opposition are not calling it out. Why aren't they making a noise about the fact that half of the people who are extremely clinically vulnerable weren't aware of this?
And we've seen obviously the massive scandal, but very underplayed by the media. I think only the Guardian that I've seen mention it at all, of the number of people having do not resuscitate orders imposed on them because they have learning difficulties, and the fact that the death rate among disabled people from the virus has been some huge number. I can't remember exactly what it was, 25%, I think, among disabled women. More are dying than would be expected in the pandemic, if all things were being treated equally. And again, where is the media outrage on this? Where is even the kind of forensic examination? Where's Mr. Forensic himself, Keir Starmer, making a fuss and standing up on behalf of disabled people who are frankly being culled at the moment by the government's policies?
That is exactly what it is. It's a cull. It is a cull. They are putting a value on the life of somebody who has a disability, be it a mental disability or a physical disability, and they are saying they are somehow worth less. And this is a narrative that we're seeing more and more of. We had that Lord the other week who basically made the same allegation that you shouldn't be paid as much because you aren't worth as much. It's an appalling way of thinking. We are supposed we live in a civilized society. A civilized society is what's the phrase? A society is only as civilized as in respect of how it treats its most vulnerable and its poorest. And quite frankly, this country is becoming more and more barbaric as a result of that. And it's not challenged. I'm a carer for 2 disabled people. I take this sort of news extremely personally. It really winds me up because I know the value of my family, and it's not for anybody else to put an arbitrary value on them. And how dare you even think of doing so, because by God, I'll walk over hot coals for them before I'll let you allow any harm to come to any of them. And I'm sure a great many other people up and down the country will feel exactly the same way. Who on earth do they think they are to put a value on a human life? Don't dare go down this road. It's a dangerous road to go down.
Well, this all ties in as well, I think, to what Nick was talking about earlier in the week on Bonnie's programme, I think it was, where he talked about the rationing of care that's happening without it being called rationing, and the fact that when you put the profit motive into healthcare, then the companies are actually incentivized to treat people, to give less treatments to people and find ways to exclude people from treatment because that gives them a cash bonus, and they're taking this very fascist approach, essentially, of picking the people who are least able to necessarily make a fuss about it, and who they regard as having less. And that's what the law didn't just say. Your work has less value, Damo. That peer the other week said, he said, well, it's not that your life's not valuable; it's just less valuable. So they're actually talking about somebody's life and saying, your life is less valuable because presumably companies can't make as big a profit out of you, and you'll cost more to treat.
And that guy's in a position to make laws in this country. Fantastic.
I mean, there was a scandal a few years ago about something called the Liverpool Pathway that included DNRs, or do not resuscitate notices, on certain people's medical records should they become seriously ill. But in many ways, the current move to put do not resuscitate notices on people with COVID is even darker, is even more concerning, because unlike almost any other hospital stay, people who are severely sick with coronavirus do not have relatives coming to see them. There is no chance that a loved one will see that written on their loved one's notes. So these things are happening without the knowledge or consent even of the people that are nearest and dearest to those that are sick.
When you see in the British, was it the British Medical Association or British Medical Journal that said, actually accused the government of social murder now, and they're hardly like a bastion of opposition to right-wing policies. So how bad it's getting. I mean, we'll move on in a second, but Nick, do you want to say anything quick about that situation?
Yeah, I mean, it shows that if you're in politics for a career or something, that won't wash here. You have to care. You really have to care about people. And that's one thing that stood out about Jeremy's leadership compared to what's now and what we had before as well. And it's also what the NHS was about. And the dynamic you mentioned, that the idea of caring for everybody and the equity of care and everybody, that being the purpose of having a state and healthcare among the duties of that state. It's about that. Whereas when profit is the motive, it is about reducing that. You make money by not providing it. Now, I won't trace a direct link between those on this right now, just because I haven't looked closely enough and other people will know more about it. But as a rule, if you care, you care. If you don't, you withdraw the care and don't speak up against what's happening.
So let's move on. We'll look at a couple of internal things. Well, not quite internal things really, but Labour specific issues. I mean, we've seen a lot of outrage this week about the fact that Labour, without giving any explanation for why, suddenly decided to delay the ballot of Labour members in Liverpool to select the party's mayoral candidate for the local elections coming up. And there are 3 women shortlisted on it. There are questions, one of them hasn't answered so far, but rather than make clear why they're imposing this delay and re-interviewing all the candidates today, they are leaving the whole thing very vague and unexplained, which is giving the right wing of the party plenty of opportunity to smear the black woman candidate, who seems to be the strongest and favourite of the left of the party, which is very strong in Liverpool. What's your thoughts on that, guys? You're all a fair distance away from Liverpool, but if the party thinks it can get away with something here, then it's certainly going to try it elsewhere.
Yeah, I think it's a trust issue, isn't it? It's kind of like nobody knows what's going on, but going off, what's been happening in the party recently, particularly to more left-leaning members, it makes you feel a bit uneasy. It's like, is the party machinery working to try and push out a left candidate? It's all very vague, but it makes me feel uneasy. It makes me feel like, why would they be doing that? So, I mean, we'll see what happens after today, but it's quite worrying that for whatever reason it wasn't done right the first time round, the interviewing, and I guess people in Liverpool are quite on edge about it at the moment.
Yeah, so the ballots were supposed to go out this week for the Liverpool City mayor elections. They haven't. We're then told that the candidates are facing another round of interviews that are taking place today. And there's a significant suspicion that this might be a setup that will adversely affect Anna Rothery, who has gone from an underdog in this contest, thankfully, to a contender, thankfully, thanks to a very competent, albeit small and entirely volunteer-run campaign team who have done absolutely sterling work and have put in a lot of long hours. I know you've reported on this already this week, Steve, that this may be down to issues with another candidate, but after being under assault for nigh on a year, the left is naturally suspicious about what is going on. Anna's got a solid background, she's got a reputation, and she should win. She's got the skill set to do it, but will she become the first female black city mayor ever? And I know that actually the Labour Black Socialist group are appalled at the prospect of Anna being dropped potentially off the back of what's going on, which we still don't fully understand properly as to why this has gone on. So I don't know if you know of any more developments with this story right now, Steve, or...
Well, the party's keeping quiet about it and not saying anything. But again, that's part of the problem, because, they might claim that they've got it, they can't say why they're doing this because it might prejudice against one candidate or whatever. But their silence is allowing prejudice against another, because one of the campaigns is being a bit unscrupulous in some of the rumours that it's spreading about what this delay is about, and it frankly isn't. But the Labour Black Socialists group has threatened to call for a campaign strike, that if they feel that she's been unfairly treated, and we'll know more about that at some point this weekend, presumably. But speaking of campaign strikes, we've also seen Momentum Bristol vote by 96% of its members to go on strike because of the way that the party is treating Labour members and candidates down in that neck of the woods. And that's a bit nearer to you, Damo. It's probably still not on your doorstep.
Yeah,
it's Southwest region.
Southwest, we're just about. I always makes me laugh when you think of Bristol as being Southwest. It's 200 miles up the road. Anyway, the farce of the AGM in Bristol.
The north,
the farce of it was an absolute farce of an AGM that took place in Bristol West. 6 hours, 100 people walked away, 11:30 at night, and all the officers' positions were won by a right winger in one of the largest, most left-wing CLPs in the country. And Momentum Bristol have voted to go on a campaign strike now. I think it was like 96% voted for it. And I don't think it can be overstated just what a nuclear option a campaign strike actually is. We want a Labour government, after all. We want the Tories out. We want Labour councillors on councils, but members cannot be expected to be abused in the manner that Southwest Regional has abused the membership in this CLP, and that delivered this farce of a result when democracy clearly did not take place there, and the membership know it. Clearly, there's been an abject lack of engagement since for Momentum members to choose this option. And I have to say, I'd feel the same way if I was in that CLP. How can any Labour member with Democratic Socialists written on their membership card campaign for a party that has acted abjectly undemocratically? I'm sure if Jennifer Forbes was here today, she'd be able to speak more on it, as she's got some quite close connections up there. But it's a sad indictment of the state of the Labour Party when members feel they have to go on strike against their own party that they volunteer for, that they pay dues into, that they feel this is the only way they can get their point across now, that they can have their say within Labour. It's terrible.
And Labour's still scrabbling about to try and get candidates to stand in a lot of these elections as well. Let's not forget. That's how disillusioned everybody is with the whole direction and state of the party at the minute. The co-op, which stands candidates jointly with Labour, has emailed people in the last 24 hours asking people to come forward and stand, because they're really struggling. And even I think a lot of the more right wing of the party are declining to stand at the moment, because I think they think they're going to get a kick in, and they don't want to put all that effort in just to do badly and get shown up. And that's a sad state of affairs when you come off the back of the surge in passion and activism and volunteering that was happening under the previous leadership. And contrary to accusations, I don't think Jeremy Corbyn was perfect. However, people did see something in him that actually stood for something and represented a chance of change. And I think that's the key problem at the minute, is that people don't feel that's the case with Keir Starmer.
Yeah, I think there's in Bristol, it's the first sort of example of an organised membership strike. But I think it's something that we'll see in a lot of CLPs, because I've spoken to members who've said that they are not willing to do anything to support the elections at the moment, because they're seeing their friends suspended without reason. They've seen hardworking campaigners of the party absolutely rake through the mud. And I think, like was just said, Jeremy inspired people to campaign, and people wanted to go out and get that Labour government. And there will be people that are still campaigning for the county elections or for the PCC elections, or whichever elections are happening, and good for them. If they've still got that impetus to do that, then good for them. But I think we're going to see a lot of people just say, until this persecution of members on the left stops, then we're just not doing anything.
It's very hard to not draw the comparisons, isn't it, between now and 5 years ago? The removal, systematic removal actually of democracy within our party, under a leader who stood not so long ago on a list of campaign pledges that he would create unity within our party, and yet under the previous leader we had a shadow cabinet made of people from right across the broad church. It's very hard to be committed to a party that every day letting you know that you're not really welcome.
Let's we're going to wind up in a couple of minutes, but before we end on that, during the 2019 general election campaign, Jeremy Corbyn waved a document that showed how the Tories were planning to sell off the NHS to American companies. And the Tories, of course, vehemently denied this, and the media helped them to do so. And it's not a new phenomenon. I mean, that's clear. It's been going on for a while. However, it has been extending during the pandemic. It's not just their UK pals and backers that can invest a few grand and make millions from the Tories in the NHS crisis. It's big American companies as well. So, Nico, you're going to run us out of the program with a couple of minutes on that, I think.
Thanks, I'll do that. So yeah, the thing about that position in the election is that it reflected Jeremy's commitment to a public health service, among other things. And but in order to really bring that across to the public, you need to be doing it every day on a constant basis. You need to be talking to the public about the US companies already here. You need to be talking to the public about how the health service every single day is being restructured in a way that benefits the companies such as that US company that recently took over 40 London GPs. That does not happen out of the blue. The National Health Service was created in a way that wasn't profitable. It was made for people, and what has been going on in the last few years has been the restructuring that has limited, as we talked about, reducing services. For example, getting rid of local GPs, concentrating services into a bigger GP. That benefits companies like the one that's come in to take over those services. Once they take them over, they're structured in a way that's profitable to them. They don't have to have a doctor see you. You can be seen by someone else who is cheaper to pay, but it means you lose your right to a doctor. That's what a company does. They cut corners. But the NHS has been doing the corner cutting for them over these years. And talking of party democracy, Bonnie brought a motion, and it was the third or fourth in a row that asked the party to oppose this. And because we've had shadow health teams who are on the right and who support this, they haven't. They've told us it was just a funding matter. So the basic idea that's been put out that there's an NHS that's still there and bits of it are sold off is wrong. The whole service is being repurposed for the benefit of companies like that and to our detriment. That's what's in Matt Hancock's coming law, which is totally connected to the recent takeover by that company. And the person who runs the UK branch of that company was previously employed by NHS England, changing the services in the way I've just described. Just look into that. So I'll leave it with that.
Well, sadly, that's a very Tory phenomenon, is allowing the people who are going to benefit from something to shape the rules and laws that are going to govern how that's done. Thank you, everybody. I think we're going to wind it up there for this week. No doubt plenty to talk about this time next week when we get together to have our roundup of what's going on then. Everybody who's watched, thank you for that. Don't forget to follow Socialist Telly on its social media platforms and on YouTube. Spread the word, share this broadcast so people get informed about what's going on, and hang in there, stay solid, and we'll see you next week. Take care.